My son's wife, Willow, always had a special kind of smile for my husband, Marcus. I watched her, silently, as Clara told me they were having an affair, Willow even calling me old and boring, 42 years of marriage, shattered by a gold digger. But some games require patience, and I learned long ago that the quiet ones usually win. This is my story. Like, share, and let us know where you are listening from. Ellie's home was a sanctuary, a testament to decades of quiet tradition. At 64, she moved through its familiar rooms with the grace of long habit, her hands finding comfort in the polished wood of antique furniture, the soft drape of linen curtains. Every Tuesday, without fail, the scent of fresh lemon and baked goods would fill the kitchen. A ritual she maintained even when the house felt emptier than usual. It was a space where memories were etched into the very walls, where every creak of the floorboards held a story. Lately, though, the quiet had become less comforting and more isolating. Her husband, Marcus, after 42 years of marriage, had grown distant. His presence in the house was a phantom, his attention elsewhere. He'd retreat to his study, doors closing softly, or leave early for business meetings that stretched late into the evening. Ellie told herself it was the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage, the quiet deepening of companionship. But a small, persistent whisper of unease had begun to stir in the corners of her mind. Their son, Lucas, now 35, was absorbed in his own world, wrapped up entirely in his marriage to Willow. Willow, with her bright, eager smile and a knack for making Lucas laugh, had swept him off his feet a few years ago. Ellie had welcomed her into the family with open arms, delighting in Lucas's newfound happiness, even if it meant he had less time for his parents. She'd convinced herself that his devotion to Willow was a beautiful thing, a sign of a strong, modern marriage. The sharp ring of the doorbell on that particular Tuesday cut through the usual peace. It wasn't the usual time for visitors. When Ellie opened the door, she found Clara, Willow's older sister, standing on her porch. Clara, usually so vibrant and put together, looked pale and utterly distraught, her eyes red-rimmed and shadowed. Her usually immaculate dark hair was slightly disheveled, as if she had run her hands through it countless times. Ellie, sensing immediate distress, ushered Clara inside, her hostess instincts kicking in. "Clara, dear, what on earth has happened? You look as though you've seen a ghost." She led her to the sun-drenched breakfast nook, a spot known for its calming warmth. "Sit down, darling. Let me get you something." Within minutes, a delicate porcelain plate of her signature cucumber sandwiches, crusts meticulously trimmed, and a slice of her freshly baked lemon cake, still warm and fragrant, were placed before Clara. Ellie poured 2 cups of Earl Grey tea, the steam rising gently between them. Clara took a shaky breath, her hands trembling slightly as she wrapped them around the warm teacup. Her gaze flickered nervously around the room, avoiding Ellie's eyes. "Ellie, I don't know how to say this." Her voice was a fragile whisper, thick with unspoken pain. "It's about Willow. And Marcus." The names hung in the air, a discordant chord in the quiet room. "They're having an affair." The world seemed to tilt. A silent, internal crack splintered through Ellie, a seismic shift deep within her core. She felt a cold wave wash over her, numbing her fingertips, but her expression remained perfectly still, a mask of serene composure. Her hands, resting on the tabletop, did not tremble. Only her breath caught, a tiny, almost imperceptible hitch, before she exhaled slowly, steadily. "An affair?" she repeated, her voice a low, even murmur, devoid of emotion. "Are you certain, Clara?" Clara nodded, a tear finally escaping and tracing a path down her cheek. "I saw them, Ellie, last week, at the old lake house, the one Marcus sometimes uses for quiet work. I went there to drop off some papers Willow had forgotten, thinking Marcus wouldn't be there. But he was, and so was she. They were kissing, not a friendly kiss, Ellie. A passionate kiss, like lovers. He had his hands in her hair, and she was laughing, leaning into him." Clara's voice broke, a sob catching in her throat. "It wasn't an accident. It was intimate." "And you confronted Willow?" Ellie asked, her gaze unwavering. fixed on Clara. Yes, later that day. I couldn't believe it. I told her it was disgusting, that she was betraying Lucas. Betraying you. Do you know what she said? Ellie? Clara's voice hardened, tinged with a bitter anger. She just laughed. She looked at me, with that sweet, innocent face of hers, and she laughed. She said you were old and boring, that you wouldn't even notice, that you were too wrapped up in your little routines and your quiet life to see what was happening right under your nose. Ellie felt a fresh sting, a cruel jab that sliced deeper than the betrayal itself. Old and boring. The words echoed, cold and sharp. Clara continued, her voice gaining a desperate urgency. She told me her whole plan. She married Lucas for the family money, Ellie. She always saw him as a stepping stone, and then she set her sights on Marcus. She said he was the real prize, the one with the actual power, the one who controlled everything. She planned to seduce him from the beginning. A tremor finally ran through Ellie's hands. She gripped the edge of the polished mahogany table, her knuckles whitening, anchoring herself against the tide of disbelief and pain. 42 years, a lifetime built on shared moments, whispered secrets, quiet comfort, all of it, a hollow stage for a performance of deception, the weight of Marcus's distance, the seemingly innocent affection between her daughter-in-law and husband. It all coalesced into a monstrous, sickening truth. The betrayal wasn't just a recent event. It was a calculated campaign, an elaborate charade that had been unfolding for years. "Why are you telling me this, Clara?" Ellie asked, her voice still unnervingly steady despite the storm raging inside her. Clara met her gaze, her own eyes filled with a raw, earnest sorrow. "Because it's wrong, Ellie. All of it. And you don't deserve this. You've been nothing but kind to me, to both of us. Willow has gone too far. This isn't right." She paused, then added, her voice thick with genuine concern. "And Lucas. Lucas doesn't deserve Willow's deception either. He truly loves her." Ellie absorbed Clara's words, the confession of a broken trust, the revelation of a meticulously woven web of lies. Her mind, surprisingly, felt clear, almost detached. The initial shock began to crystallize into something colder, sharper. She released her grip on the table, smoothed her apron, and then looked directly at Clara, a faint, almost imperceptible shift in her eyes. "Clara," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I'm going to pretend I never heard this conversation." Clara's eyes widened, a flicker of confusion crossing her face. "But, Ellie," Ellie held up a hand, silencing her. "What you have told me today, Clara, is a secret that will remain between us. I ask that you do not speak of it to anyone else, not to Lucas, not to any other member of the family." She picked up her teacup, her movements deliberate and precise. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched the corners of her lips. "Some games require patience, my dear." The words were delivered with a calm conviction that hinted at depths Clara had never known Ellie possessed. The quiet woman who maintained traditions was gone, replaced by someone else. Someone whose strategic game had just begun. The heavy oak door closed behind Clara, sealing the silence in Ellie's kitchen. The scent of lemon cake, once so comforting, now seemed to mock her, a false sweetness in a house suddenly feeling tainted, its very air thick with deceit. Ellie remained at the table, her teacup growing cold between her fingers, the delicate porcelain, a stark contrast to the brutal truth she had just absorbed. Every familiar object, every cherished corner of her home, felt alien, tainted by the revelation of Marcus and Willow's betrayal. The sanctuary had become a stage for a secret drama she was only now learning she was a central, unwitting player in. Hours later, as dusk settled, Marcus's key turned in the lock. The familiar sound, usually a welcome signal of his return, now grated on her nerves. With a practiced ease, Ellie rose, smoothing her apron, her face a carefully constructed mask of normalcy. His favorite pot roast was simmering in the oven, its rich aroma filling the kitchen, a domestic illusion she was determined to uphold. Marcus walked in, tossing his briefcase onto the hallway table with a grunt. He offered a quick, distracted evening, Ellie, before heading straight for the study, phone already in hand. Ellie watched him, her gaze sharpened by Clara's confession. She noticed the way his thumb compulsively scrolled through his phone. Even as he spoke, she caught the faint, unfamiliar scent of a new, somewhat musky cologne. Not the subtle, classic scent he had worn for decades, and when he did glance at her, his eyes quickly darted away, avoiding her direct gaze, a nervous twitch she hadn't consciously registered before. She had dismissed these changes as signs of age, of preoccupation with work, of the natural waning of passion in a long marriage. Now, she saw them with chilling clarity. In that moment, standing in her kitchen, observing her husband of 42 years, Ellie realized she was seeing him, truly seeing him, for the very first time. The man she thought she knew, the steady, reliable Marcus, had always been partially obscured by her own love and trust. Now, the veil had been ripped away, revealing a stranger, a deceitful shadow of the man she had married. The illusion of their shared life, meticulously built over 4 decades, lay shattered at her feet. That night, lying beside Marcus in their king-sized bed, the chasm between them felt wider than any ocean. He was asleep, breathing softly, oblivious to the storm raging within her. Ellie lay awake, her mind a whirlwind of shattered memories and burgeoning resolve. The words old and boring echoed in her head, fueling a cold, steady anger. They wanted to play games. Fine. She closed her eyes, a slow, determined smile touching her lips in the darkness. She would play too. And she would play to win. 3 days later, Sunday dinner arrived. Ellie had chosen her usual dress, a practical, elegant navy, her hair neatly pinned. Willow arrived shortly before Lucas, her presence announced by a bright, saccharine laugh that grated on Ellie's newly sensitive ears. She wore a striking designer dress, a vibrant emerald silk that shimmered with every movement, drawing immediate attention. It was new, expensive, and a shade too bold for a quiet family dinner. As Willow leaned in for a hug, Ellie's senses, now on high alert, registered it immediately. The faintest trace of Marcus's new cologne, mingling with Willow's floral perfume. A cold certainty settled in her stomach. Willow's smile, usually so charming, now struck Ellie as false, as glittering and cheap as costume jewelry. "Eleanor. Darling," Willow chirped, her eyes wide with feigned concern. "You look a little tired. Are you all right?" She patted Ellie's arm with a light, dismissive touch. "I've been so worried about you, actually. About you and Marcus." Her voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, as if sharing a secret she hadn't been asked to keep. "You two seem so distant lately. I mean, it's natural, isn't it? After so many years, the spark just fades. It happens to everyone." Ellie maintained her composure, her expression a careful blend of mild surprise and vague melancholy. "Oh, Willow, dear, it's just a bit of a rough patch, I suppose," she replied, a sigh perfectly timed. "Things aren't always easy, are they? But we manage." She watched Willow's eyes, noting the subtle flicker of satisfaction, the tiny, almost imperceptible widening of her smile. Willow was relishing this, the perceived confirmation of her narrative. "Of course you manage," Willow said, patting Ellie's hand, her voice dripping with pity. "But life is too short, isn't it? Too short to stay in a marriage that isn't fulfilling. You deserve happiness, Eleanor. True happiness." The words, meant to sound empathetic, were a thinly veiled push, a subtle suggestion for Ellie to step aside. Just then, Lucas arrived, bursting through the door with a cheerful, "Mom, Willow." In an instant, Willow transformed, her posture straightened, her expression softened into that of a devoted, loving wife. Her arm slipped around Lucas's waist, her head resting on his shoulder. "My wonderful husband," she cooed. But even as she spoke, Ellie noticed Willow's eyes, bright and restless, drifting towards the hallway, towards the doorway where Marcus would eventually appear. Her attention was divided, her performance flawless for Lucas, but Ellie saw the seams. Marcus arrived late, as he often did these days, offering a brief apology about traffic. He walked into the living room, his gaze sweeping the room before settling on Willow. Their eyes met, not in a quick glance, but for just a moment too long. A silent acknowledgement that passed between them, a spark that only Ellie, with her heightened awareness, could now detect. She watched the subtle shift in Willow's posture, the faint blush on her cheeks, the way Marcus subtly squared his shoulders. Later, as Ellie moved between the kitchen and dining room, carrying dishes, she caught fragments of hushed conversation from the living room. Marcus's low voice, strained. "Can't keep doing this, Willow." And Willow's softer, more insistent reply. "She doesn't know anything, Marcus. She wouldn't even guess." Ellie continued to hum a cheerful tune as she plated the pot roast, her movements unhurried, graceful. She arranged the vegetables, poured the gravy, her mind meticulously cataloging every word, every glance, every betraying detail. She hummed, a pleasant domestic sound, secretly knowing everything. The very next morning, Ellie, with a quiet determination that belied her serene exterior, made an appointment, not with her usual family solicitor, who had handled everything from wills to property transfers for generations, but with a new name, one she'd found through a discreet online search. Olivia Reed. Olivia specialized in complex divorces, a detail that had caught Ellie's eye. She requested the earliest available slot, emphasizing the need for absolute discretion. Olivia's office was not in the bustling financial district, but tucked away in a quieter, more historic part of downtown, housed in a charming brownstone. The reception area was understated, with soft lighting and comfortable, well-worn leather chairs, designed to exude a sense of calm and confidentiality. When Ellie walked in, she felt a flicker of reassurance. This was not a place for drama, but for strategy. Olivia Reed, a woman in her late 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and an empathetic smile, greeted Ellie warmly. "Mrs. Harrison, please, have a seat." Ellie settled into the plush armchair, her hands clasped in her lap. She began to speak, her voice even and measured, laying out the broad strokes of her situation, omitting the raw, emotional details for now. "Olivia, I'm here because I need to understand my legal standing. My husband, Marcus, and I have been married for 42 years. There's been a significant shift in our relationship recently. Before I make any decisions, I want to fully comprehend the implications, particularly regarding our assets." She deliberately avoided mentioning infidelity directly, phrasing it as a request for information, a strategic exploration of options. Olivia nodded slowly, her pen poised over a legal pad. "That's a very smart approach, Mrs. Harrison. Many clients come to me already emotionally distraught, ready to take drastic steps. Understanding your legal position first allows you to make informed decisions, free from immediate emotional pressure." She looked at Ellie, a hint of admiration in her gaze. "It gives you power." They spent the next hour meticulously reviewing Ellie's financial landscape. The house, a substantial, beautiful property that had been in Ellie's family for over a century. Various investment accounts, some jointly held, others primarily in Marcus's name. And, of course, Marcus's family business, a successful architectural firm he had inherited from his father, which had grown considerably under his leadership. Ellie provided all the documents she had meticulously gathered over the past few days, her mind sharp, her memory for dates and figures surprisingly precise. "Now, Mrs. Harrison," Olivia began, tapping her pen on a particular document. "This is what truly catches my attention. The trust established by your grandfather." Ellie nodded. "Yes. The Harrison Family Trust. My grandfather was very particular about family legacy. He passed it on to me when I turned 25. Olivia's eyes scanned the complex legal jargon. "Indeed. And it's quite an ingenious piece of legal work. It includes some very specific provisions regarding inheritance and, rather unusually, spousal claims in the event of a marital dissolution." She looked up at Ellie, a hint of excitement in her voice. "Let's start with the primary residence. The house you currently live in." Ellie leaned forward, a flicker of genuine interest sparking in her eyes. "It explicitly states," Olivia read aloud, pointing to a highlighted section, "the ancestral home, located at address, shall remain within the direct bloodline of Eleanor Harrison. It can never be sold, mortgaged, or transferred to anyone outside your direct bloodline, nor can it be claimed by any spouse in the event of divorce, regardless of the circumstances, unless explicitly willed by Eleanor Harrison, to said spouse. Essentially, Mrs. Harrison, this house is yours, irrevocably, as long as you wish to live in it, and cannot be touched by Marcus in a divorce. A wave of relief, potent and sweet, washed over Ellie. The house, her sanctuary, her heritage, was safe, but Olivia wasn't finished. And then there's this. She turned a page, her finger tracing a particularly dense paragraph. This clause here, regarding marital conduct, it's quite old-fashioned, but legally binding, given the specific wording of your grandfather's trust. It states that in the event of infidelity by either party, the innocent party retains all rights to any and all properties and assets directly connected to or acquired through the Harrison family trust. Furthermore, the offending party shall forfeit any claim to these assets. Olivia paused, letting the full weight of the words sink in. This includes not just the house, but any income derived from assets within the trust, and any properties subsequently purchased using trust funds or significant trust income. Ellie felt a profound sense of hope bloom within her for the first time in weeks. It was a strange, almost dizzying sensation. She had anticipated a grueling, painful fight, a stripping away of her life, piece by piece. Instead, a protective shield, crafted by her far-sighted grandfather, had been waiting for her all along. "Does Marcus know about these specific clauses?" Ellie asked, her voice barely a whisper. Olivia shook her head. "It's highly unlikely. These are very particular, even antiquated, provisions, not typical in modern trust documents. Unless he or his lawyer has meticulously reviewed this original trust deed, which I doubt he has, he would assume standard marital property laws apply. He will almost certainly believe he is entitled to half of everything, as is common practice in a long marriage." Ellie felt a faint smile touch her lips. Marcus and Willow were playing a game, indeed, but they were playing it blind, unaware of the hidden rules, the critical clauses that would utterly redefine the endgame. She thanked Olivia, promising to be in touch, and left the discreet office feeling lighter, a sense of quiet power settling over her. The weight of betrayal still lingered, but now, it was accompanied by a thrilling sense of strategic advantage. That evening, as Marcus sat at the dinner table, recounting a mundane detail of his day, Ellie watched him, his gestures, his tone, his carefully constructed performance of an ordinary husband. But now, Ellie saw the cracks in his facade, the subtle guilt beneath his forced cheer, the flicker of arrogance in his eyes that spoke of secrets kept and power wielded. He thought he was in control. He thought he knew the rules. Ellie simply smiled, a silent, knowing smile. A week after her meeting with Olivia Reed, Ellie chose her moment carefully. Marcus was in his study, the faint scent of his new cologne clinging to the air. She knocked gently, then entered, her voice calm, almost sympathetic. "Marcus, may I speak with you for a moment?" He looked up from his computer, a flicker of apprehension in his eyes, quickly masked. "Of course, Ellie. What is it?" Ellie settled into the armchair opposite his desk, her hands resting calmly in her lap. "I've been doing a lot of thinking lately. About us. Our marriage." She paused, letting the words hang in the air, allowing him to anticipate. "It feels as though we've drifted apart, hasn't it? Perhaps it's time we both considered other options, to pursue our individual happiness." She watched him closely, a silent observer in this carefully orchestrated play. Marcus's initial apprehension gave way to a carefully constructed solemnity. He sighed, rubbing his temples as if burdened by a profound decision. "Ellie, I understand. I've felt it too. It's a difficult thing to admit, after so many years, but perhaps you're right. If we're both unhappy, then maybe a divorce is for the best." A flash of undisguised relief, swift and fleeting, danced in his eyes, betraying his feigned regret. He couldn't hide it from her now. Ellie offered him a small, sad smile, playing her part in this terrible theater. "I suppose it is. It will be amicable, of course. For Lucas's sake." He nodded, a sense of control settling over him. He thought he had won. He thought she was simply accepting her fate, the old and boring wife stepping aside for the vibrant new future he envisioned with Willow. Ellie imagined Willow's triumphant smirk, their whispered congratulations to each other on their perceived cleverness, their seamless manipulation of her quiet, predictable life. Let them think that. Let them bask in their delusion. The day of the divorce meeting arrived, just a few weeks later. It was held at Gregory Stone's law office, a lavish affair perched on the top floor of a gleaming downtown skyscraper. Gregory was a friend of Marcus's from his exclusive country club, a man known for his aggressive tactics and a penchant for expensive suits. He was, Ellie noted with a silent assessment, precisely the kind of lawyer Marcus would choose to ensure his victory. As Ellie entered the opulent conference room, she found Marcus already seated at the polished mahogany table. To her left, Lucas sat, his face pale and drawn, looking utterly devastated. He had tried to mediate, to understand why his parents were breaking apart, and Ellie had simply offered vague platitudes about growing apart. Beside Lucas, Willow sat, her presence an unwelcome, jarring note. She claimed she was there to support Lucas, but her hand rested possessively on his thigh, a silent declaration of her role in this unfolding drama. She wore a self-satisfied smirk that she tried, unsuccessfully, to mask as concern. Gregory Stone, a man whose expensive watch seemed to gleam as brightly as his practiced smile, greeted Ellie with a patronizing air. "Ellie, my dear, come in, come in. We're just about ready to finalize everything." He handed her a thick sheaf of documents. "We've drafted a settlement agreement that we believe is fair and equitable. Given the circumstances of your long marriage," Ellie accepted the papers, her movements slow and deliberate. She glanced through them, not truly reading, for Olivia had already prepared her for the likely content. The proposed settlement was stark, a blatant power play. Ellie was to receive a modest sum, enough to purchase a small condo in a less desirable neighborhood. Half of their joint savings, which were surprisingly depleted, and a modest amount of alimony, commensurate with her needs, as Gregory put it. Marcus, on the other hand, would retain the sprawling family home, the successful architectural business, all vacation properties, and the majority of their investment portfolio. It was a thinly veiled attempt to strip her of everything, to leave her with just enough to exist, while Marcus and Willow would inherit the kingdom. "This seems rather one-sided, Gregory," Ellie remarked, her voice mild, betraying only a hint of surprise, not anger. She looked at the figures, then at Marcus, whose gaze was fixed on the table. Gregory cleared his throat, adjusting his tie. "Well, Ellie, Marcus has been the primary breadwinner for the entirety of your marriage. The business is entirely his family's legacy, and as for the house," he paused, a slight sneer on his face, "there are some irregularities with the deed and its connection to an old family trust. Frankly, it would be a protracted legal battle, and frankly, we don't believe you'd have a strong claim there. It's best to avoid unnecessary litigation. Wouldn't you agree?" He was clearly trying to intimidate her, to imply that even her ancestral home was now at risk. Ellie's eyes flickered to Willow, who had straightened in her chair, a triumphant gleam in her eyes. Ellie could practically see her mentally redecorating the living room, envisioning herself as the new lady of the house. Willow's hand squeezed Lucas's thigh, a subtle, possessive gesture. Lucas, however, seemed oblivious, his face a mask of profound sadness. He believed this was an amicable parting, a tragic but necessary end to a love story. Utterly unaware of the calculated cruelty unfolding before him, Ellie took a deep breath, her gaze sweeping around the room, taking in the smug faces of Marcus and Willow, the condescending smile of Gregory Stone, and the heartbroken expression of her son. She turned back to the stack of papers, her fingers running over the signature line. "All right then," she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. "Where do I sign?" A collective gasp, subtle but palpable, filled the room. Marcus looked up, surprise warring with relief on his face. Willow's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine shock replacing her smirk. Even Gregory Stone, the seasoned lawyer, seemed momentarily taken aback by her immediate capitulation. Ellie met their gazes, a serene, almost beatific smile on her face. She picked up the pen they offered. Its cool metal, a promise of what was to come. As Ellie reached for the pen, Lucas, his voice thick with concern, finally spoke up. "Mom, are you sure about this? This seems so fast. Maybe you should take some time, think it over. You don't have to rush." He looked genuinely distressed, a stark contrast to the barely concealed eagerness of Willow and Marcus. Ellie turned to her son, offering him a small, reassuring smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, Lucas, darling, sometimes in life, you have to know when to fight and when to accept reality." She patted his hand gently, a silent message of love and quiet strength. "Your father and I, we've had a good run. It's time for new chapters, for both of us." Her words were carefully chosen, designed to sound like resignation, not surrender. Marcus, meanwhile, watched her with a mixture of puzzlement and burgeoning nervousness. Her easy capitulation was unsettling him. He had anticipated a fight, perhaps tears, certainly an argument about the terms. Her calmness, her swift acceptance, made him uneasy. He hadn't expected this kind of quiet strength from the woman he had dismissed as old and boring. Ellie signed the documents with a flourish, her signature firm and unhesitating. Then, she pushed the papers across the table towards Marcus. She looked directly at him, her gaze unwavering. "I hope this gives you everything you're looking for, Marcus." The words were delivered without a hint of bitterness, almost with a serene sincerity that only she understood. A flicker of guilt, brief and almost imperceptible, crossed Marcus's face at her direct statement. It was quickly overshadowed, however, by a surge of selfish satisfaction. He reached for the papers, a slight tremor in his hand, relief washing over him. The woman who had been his wife for over 4 decades was letting him go, without a fuss, without a battle. He was free. Beside Lucas, Willow could barely contain her excitement. Her eyes sparkled, and she gave Lucas's hand a squeeze that was a little too tight, a little too triumphant. "See, Lucas," she chirped, her voice falsely sweet. "Your parents are just so mature. This is the best way. Everyone gets to move on, happily." She beamed at Ellie, a victor celebrating her spoils, expecting Ellie to crumble. Ellie simply met Willow's triumphant gaze with a serene, almost beatific smile. "Indeed, Willow. Maturity is key." She accepted the false praise, her composure unbreaking, letting Willow believe she had won the first round decisively. Gregory Stone, regaining his professional swagger, announced, "Excellent. With all signatures in place, the divorce will be finalized in precisely 60 days. The terms are clear." He closed the folder with a definitive snap, clearly pleased with the swift and uncomplicated outcome. Ellie rose, gathered her handbag, and offered a polite nod to Gregory. She gave Lucas a soft kiss on the cheek, murmuring, "Be well, my dear." She didn't spare Marcus or Willow another glance as she walked out of the lavish office. As she reached her car, parked discreetly in the underground garage, a deep, cold satisfaction settled over her. They had absolutely no idea about the true rules of the game they were playing. She started the engine, a silent promise forming in her mind. 2 weeks later, the quiet afternoon was shattered by the sound of Lucas's car screeching into the driveway. It wasn't his usual careful parking. The tires kicked up gravel, and the car jerked to a stop. Ellie, who was tending to her roses, looked up, her heart lurching with a premonition. Lucas stumbled out of the car, looking utterly broken. His hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot, and his face was a mask of raw pain and disbelief. He didn't even make it to the front door. He collapsed onto the porch steps, burying his face in his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Ellie rushed to him, her gardener's gloves still on. She knelt beside him, gently placing a hand on his back. "Lucas, my dear boy, what is it? What's happened?" He lifted his head, his eyes haunted, tears streaming down his face. "She's been lying to me, Mom," he whispered, his voice hoarse, barely audible. "All of it. Willow and Dad." The names, twisted together in accusation, hung heavy in the air. Ellie didn't press him. She simply sat beside him on the cold stone steps, letting him process the crushing weight of the truth. She held him, offering silent comfort, her own heart aching for her son's pain, yet simultaneously filled with a grim, knowing expectation. After a long while, Lucas pulled away, his voice still trembling but gaining strength from his fury. I found her old phone. She was trying to sell it, but forgot to wipe it properly. He choked back a sob. Hundreds of text messages, Mom. Between her and Dad. Going back months, even before we were married. Planning it all. The affair. The divorce. She was telling him how to get me to move out, how to convince you to sign the papers without a fight. He clenched his fists, tears of rage mingling with those of betrayal. And the worst part? She was bragging to someone, probably Clara, about how easy it was to manipulate both of you. How she had you both wrapped around her little finger. She called you the naive old lady. And Dad, the easily flattered fool. Ellie felt a fresh wave of cold anger wash over her, but her face remained calm, her hands steady as she stroked Lucas's hair. "Oh, Lucas," she murmured, her voice soft, yet laced with steel that only she could hear. "My poor, dear boy." The game was finally beginning. Ellie held her son close, her heart aching for his pain. A pain she knew all too well, though hers had been carefully contained. She let him sob, letting the raw emotion wash over him, knowing he needed to release it. When his tears finally subsided, she pulled back slightly, gently wiping a stray tear from his cheek. "My brave boy," she murmured. "How did you find out?" "Precisely." Her voice remained calm, a steady anchor in his storm. Lucas took a shaky breath. "Clara called me, Mom. She couldn't take it anymore. She said she'd tried to warn Willow, tried to make her see sense, but Willow just laughed at her. She told me to look at Willow's old phone, said she saw Willow delete messages from it once, but maybe not all of them. So I did. I found it in a drawer, and everything was there. Hundreds of messages. Between her and Dad." His voice cracked, still thick with disbelief. "I confronted her. She didn't even deny it. Mom." She just shrugged. She looked at me and said I was naive, forever thinking she truly loved me. Said I was just a means to an end. She said Dad could give her things, a life, that I never could. That he had the real power, the real money. A fresh wave of anger surged through Lucas, his jaw tightening. I told her to get out, gave her an hour to pack her things and be gone. She just smirked. Mom. She actually smirked, said it was fine, that she'd be living somewhere much nicer very soon anyway. He buried his face in his hands again. The image of Willow's triumphant smirk clearly seared into his memory. How could she, Mom? How could they both? Ellie reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "Lucas, my sweet boy, I am so deeply sorry you had to experience this. No one deserves to be treated that way, least of all you. You are a good man, with a good heart. You deserved honesty and loyalty." He looked up at her, his eyes still red and swollen. "But Mom, you're so calm. How can you be so calm? After all Dad did, after all the years, doesn't it hurt you? Doesn't it make you want to scream?" Ellie took a deep breath. This was it, the moment for full disclosure. "It does hurt, Lucas, more than you can imagine. But I've known for a little while now, and knowing allowed me to choose my path, rather than letting theirs be forced upon me." She met his gaze, a quiet intensity in her eyes. "There's a great deal more you deserve to know, my son." She began to recount the story, starting from Clara's unexpected visit, her pale face and tearful confession in the quiet kitchen. She described the cold certainty that had settled over her, the subtle changes she had observed in Marcus. The new cologne. The averted gaze. She spoke of her trip to Olivia Reed's office, her lawyer's sharp mind, and the subsequent revelation of her grandfather's meticulously drafted trust. Your great-grandfather, Lucas, was a very shrewd man. He anticipated many things, and he made sure that certain assets, particularly this house, would always remain within our direct bloodline, protected from any outside claims, especially in the event of a divorce. She paused, letting that sink in. More importantly, he included an unusual clause about marital conduct. If one spouse is found to be unfaithful, the innocent party retains all rights to any assets connected to or acquired through the trust. The offending party, your father in this case, forfeits any claim to those assets. Lucas listened in stunned silence, his earlier sobs replaced by a growing sense of shock and comprehension. His jaw dropped slightly as the pieces of the puzzle began to click into place. So you knew all along?" he whispered, his voice filled with a dawning awe. "When you signed those papers at Gregory Stone's office, you knew they were practically meaningless?" Ellie nodded, a faint, knowing smile gracing her lips. "I did. I knew that Marcus, and by extension Willow, believed they were orchestrating a brilliant coup. They thought they had outsmarted me, stripped me of everything, leaving me with only a pittance. They thought I was too old and boring to see through their schemes, too naive to fight back." Her eyes hardened slightly. "I let them believe that. I let them bask in their triumph. Because sometimes, Lucas, you have to let people show you their true character. Unburdened by the fear of consequences. It reveals them. Completely." Lucas stared at her, a mixture of disbelief and profound admiration on his face. He shook his head slowly. "Mom, I had no idea. I had no idea you were so strategic. So powerful." He had always seen her as the gentle, nurturing matriarch, the keeper of traditions, never as a silent, calculating force. Ellie simply squeezed his hand. "There's more to your old mother than meets the eye, I suppose." She stood up, pulling him gently to his feet. "But now, the game is set. They have made their choices, and they have revealed themselves. The consequences, my dear Lucas, are now entirely up to Marcus and Willow." The doorbell rang again. An hour or so after Lucas had poured out his heart, Ellie answered it to find Clara standing hesitantly on the porch, her expression anxious and filled with apology. "Ellie, Lucas, I just heard. I'm so sorry. I should have done more, sooner." Tears welled in her eyes. I hated watching it. But I didn't know how to stop her without ruining everything. I just felt like such a coward. Lucas, who had been sitting quietly at the kitchen table, rose and went to her. He put a comforting hand on her arm. "Clara, please, don't apologize. You saved me. You saved me from living a lie for the rest of my life. I found the messages because of you. Thank you." His voice was heartfelt, raw with emotion, but also genuine gratitude. Ellie watched them, a silent observer, and recognized the stark contrast between Clara's genuine remorse and Willow's manipulative callousness. Clara, despite her initial hesitation, had ultimately chosen the path of truth and integrity. "Clara," Ellie said, her voice soft but firm, "you did what was right. When it mattered most, you chose loyalty and honesty over family convenience, even when it meant exposing your own sister. That takes immense courage." Clara's shoulders slumped slightly, a mix of relief and lingering pain on her face. "I was so afraid you'd hate me. That you'd blame me for Willow's actions." Ellie shook her head gently. "Hate is a heavy burden, Clara, and an unnecessary one. Willow's actions revealed what was already here, within her, not something you created. You merely held up a mirror." She offered Clara a warm, genuine smile. "Why don't you stay for dinner, Clara?" Lucas suggested suddenly, stepping in. "Mom's making her famous pot roast, and frankly, I could use some good company." Ellie's smile widened. "A wonderful idea, Lucas. There's plenty, and the more, the merrier." As they moved about the kitchen, preparing the evening meal, a different kind of warmth began to fill the familiar space. The toxic cloud of betrayal, which had hung heavy over the house for weeks, seemed to lift, replaced by a sense of quiet resilience and unexpected camaraderie. Ellie felt a renewed sense of strength, not just within herself, but in the bonds forming around her. Willow's betrayal, while devastating, had paradoxically revealed Lucas's quiet strength and Clara's unwavering loyalty. Clara, still a little subdued, recounted a few more stories of Willow's ambition, her ruthless drive for status and wealth. "She always told me I was too soft, too trusting, that I'd never get anywhere if I didn't learn to play dirty." Lucas, now more composed, shook his head. "She was wrong. Being decent is still the right choice, But it doesn't mean you have to be naive. It just means you choose to build something real, rather than a house of cards. The conversation flowed easily, the weight of their shared secret forging a new, stronger connection between them. Later that evening, after the dishes were done and the last crumbs of lemon cake consumed, Lucas walked Clara to her car. Ellie watched from the window as they spoke softly for a few minutes, Clara offering a final, grateful hug before driving away. When Lucas returned inside, a thoughtful expression on his face, he found Ellie in the living room, dimming the lights. "She's remarkable, Mom," he said, almost to himself. "Clara, she really is." Ellie simply smiled, a quiet knowing in her eyes. "Yes, she is, my dear. Some people surprise you." She prepared for bed, feeling a fragile but persistent hope for the future. A future she now knew would be profoundly different from the one she had envisioned just weeks ago. The battle was yet to truly begin, but she felt ready. The call came precisely 63 days later, just 3 days after the official 60-day window for the divorce finalization. Ellie was watering her plants in the morning light when her phone rang. The display showed Marcus's number. She took a slow, steadying breath before answering. "Ellie?" Marcus's voice was not his usual calm, assured tone. It was tight, laced with panic, almost a shout. "What the hell have you done?" Ellie's heart beat a steady rhythm, but her voice was as calm and composed as ever. "Good morning, Marcus. To what do I owe the pleasure of this agitated call?" "The house, Ellie. There's a problem with the house. And some trust that no one mentioned. Gregory just called me, screaming about hidden clauses and gross misrepresentation." "What is he talking about?" His questions tumbled out, raw with disbelief and burgeoning fear. The realization had clearly just hit him. Ellie paused, letting the silence stretch for a moment, savoring it. "Oh, that," she finally responded, her voice sweet and unconcerned. "Are you referring to the Harrison family trust, Marcus? The one my grandfather established, which includes specific provisions for the ancestral home and certain marital conduct clauses, the one that explicitly states the house cannot be transferred to anyone outside my direct bloodline, and that in the event of spousal infidelity, the innocent party retains all rights to assets connected to the trust, with the offending party forfeiting all claims?" She laid out the full, unvarnished truth, each word a carefully placed stone in the foundation of his impending collapse. "Yes, Marcus. I'm quite familiar with my family's trust." The silence on the line stretched, thick with Marcus's dawning horror. When he finally spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper, laced with a chilling realization. "You knew about this trust the whole time, didn't you? When you signed those papers, you knew they were worthless." It wasn't a question, but an accusation, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "Of course I did, Marcus," Ellie replied, her voice remaining perfectly calm, devoid of any anger, only a quiet, resolute finality. "My family's legacy has always been important to me. My grandfather, as I mentioned, was a very foresighted man. He established that trust to protect against exactly this kind of situation." She paused, letting the full implications sink in. "You see, Marcus, you never actually owned this house. It's held in trust for me, and after me, for Lucas, as long as it remains in our direct bloodline. And because of your actions, your admitted adultery with Willow, you have forfeited any right to remain here." The trust is quite explicit. A profound silence descended once more, broken only by a strangled gasp in the background that Ellie recognized as Willow's. Marcus's voice returned, but it was now laced with genuine defeat, a raw vulnerability that was startling to hear after so many years of his confident assertiveness. "But where am I supposed to go? Where are we supposed to go?" Ellie felt no pity. "That, Marcus, is a question you and Willow will have to figure out together. I'm sure your shared vision for somewhere much nicer will materialize." Her tone was cold, sharp as ice. "Ellie, please," Marcus pleaded, a desperate edge to his voice. "Don't do this. We can talk. We can fix this. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake." "A mistake?" Ellie scoffed softly, a bitter edge entering her voice for the first time. No, Marcus. It wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate, calculated betrayal, spanning years, orchestrated with my son's wife. It was a choice you made. Over and over again. And now, you will live with the consequences of those choices. In the background, Willow's voice rose, shrill and frantic. Tell her no, Marcus. Tell her she can't do this. This is our house now. Marcus seemed to deflate entirely. I have to go, he muttered, his voice hollow. Before ending the call abruptly, Ellie calmly placed her phone back on the counter. It vibrated almost immediately with another incoming call from Marcus, then another. She ignored them all, her gaze drifting out to her peaceful garden. The storm was finally breaking. Barely an hour later, Lucas's car pulled into the driveway, followed closely by Clara's. They burst through the front door, Lucas's face a mixture of rage and grim determination, Clara looking pale but resolute. Lucas held a thick manila folder clutched in his hand. Mom, Lucas began, his voice tight. You won't believe what we found. Clara had a spare key to Willow's old lockbox at the bank, one she hadn't emptied yet. We went there after I spoke with her. He dumped the contents of the folder onto the kitchen table. Ellie's eyes widened as she looked at the documents. There were pages and pages of meticulous planning, copies of Ellie's grandfather's will, shockingly, with Willow's handwritten annotations circling specific clauses, almost as if she had been studying them for years. There was a detailed timeline, charting Marcus's seduction, Lucas's manipulation, and the stages of the divorce plan. Willow had been planning this for a very long time, but the most chilling discovery was a document tucked away at the bottom. A forged life insurance policy on Ellie, with Willow named as the sole beneficiary. The dates indicated it had been taken out just 6 months prior, using Ellie's fraudulently obtained information. The audacity, Lucas growled, his hands clenched into fists. She wasn't just after the house and Dad's money. She was planning to get rid of you entirely, Mom, once she was settled. The money from this policy would have been her ultimate payout. He took a deep, shaky breath. We've already contacted Detective Ramirez. This is identity theft, insurance fraud, and attempted murder. Mom. Clara, her face ashen, spoke hesitantly. There's something else, Ellie. Something I should have told you before. My Aunt Eleanor, my mother's sister, died 2 years ago, unexpectedly. She was quite elderly, but healthy. Willow was her primary caregiver at the time. Aunt Eleanor left Willow her house and all her savings. Clara swallowed hard. Detective Ramirez is going to be looking into that as well. Now, a cold dread seeped into Ellie's bones. Aunt Eleanor. A gentle, kind woman. The pieces clicked into a terrifying mosaic of a serial predator. Just as the full weight of these revelations settled, the sound of a large truck rumbling down the driveway filled the air. Ellie looked out the window. A moving truck, a large rental, was backing up towards the front of the house. Marcus was in the driver's seat, his face grim. Willow sat beside him, her expression a furious scowl, already half out of the truck, gesturing wildly towards the front door. Ellie calmly collected the documents, placing them back into the folder. It seems our guests have arrived, she stated, her voice remarkably even. Lucas, Clara. If you'll excuse me, I think I'll retreat inside for a moment. She offered them a tight, knowing smile, then turned and walked deeper into the house, leaving Lucas and Clara to face the oncoming storm. From the quiet sanctuary of her living room window, Ellie watched the scene unfold. Lucas stood on the front lawn, a pillar of righteous fury, facing Marcus and Willow, who were now fuming beside their rented moving truck. Willow, her face contorted with rage, shrieked, "This is my house! You can't do this to us!" Clara, stepping forward with surprising courage, met Willow's glare head-on. "No, Willow. It's not your house. It's Ellie's, and it always has been." Infuriated, Willow lunged at Clara, a wild animal cornered. But Lucas, quick as lightning, stepped between them, his posture unyielding. "Get off this property, both of you," he commanded, his voice cold and authoritative, unlike anything Ellie had heard from him before. "Now, or I swear to God, I will call the police, and they will remove you." Marcus, recognizing the futility of the situation, the game completely lost, grabbed Willow's arm. His face was a mask of utter defeat and shame. He tried to pull her towards the truck, but Willow resisted, her eyes darting towards the house, spotting Ellie at the window. "You old witch!" Willow screamed, her voice cracking with venom. "You think you've won? I'll make sure everyone knows all your family's dirty secrets. I'll expose everything." Ellie calmly pushed open the window, allowing her voice to carry clearly across the lawn. "Willow," she said, her tone utterly serene, almost conversational. "It seems Detective Ramirez is very interested in the circumstances surrounding Aunt Eleanor's passing. He's quite curious about certain details, specifically the digitalis he expects to find upon exhumation." Willow's face, already flushed with anger, drained of all color. Her mouth fell open, and for the first time, she was utterly speechless, her carefully constructed composure collapsing entirely. Marcus, witnessing this terrifying transformation, wasted no time. He practically dragged Willow into the passenger seat of the truck, slammed the door shut, and sped away, leaving a cloud of dust and their hastily packed belongings behind. Lucas and Clara walked into the house moments later, their shoulders visibly slumped in relief. "It's over, Mom," Lucas said, running a hand through his hair. "The house part, at least." Ellie offered him a small smile. "Yes, the house part is over. But justice for Willow, I suspect, has only just begun." Clara sat heavily at the kitchen table, her head in her hands. I can't believe my own sister. What kind of person?" she trailed off, her voice thick with conflicted emotions. Ellie placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Clara, you owe her no sympathy. You warned us. You helped Lucas find the truth. And you stood by what was right. That's all that matters." Months later, the house was filled with a different kind of warmth. It was Thanksgiving, and the aroma of roasted turkey and spiced pumpkin pie mingled with laughter. Lucas and Clara, now engaged and radiating a quiet happiness, moved easily through the kitchen, helping Ellie prepare the feast. Their bond, forged in betrayal, had blossomed into something beautiful and genuine. The doorbell rang, and to everyone's surprise, Detective Ramirez stood on the porch. He offered a courteous smile. "Ellie, Lucas, Clara, just wanted to give you an update. Willow has been formally charged with insurance fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. Aunt Eleanor's exhumation revealed digitalis in her system, consistent with intentional poisoning. We're building a strong murder case." He paused, then added, "Marcus has also been charged as an accessory to the fraud. He's cooperating fully, hoping for a reduced sentence." It seems he finally understood the depth of Willow's plans and his own precarious position. A profound sense of relief washed over Ellie, mixed with the lingering hollowness that profound betrayal leaves behind. Justice, slow and methodical, was finally being served. Later, as the dining room filled with the genuine warmth of friends and chosen family neighbors who had become confidantes, old friends who had rallied around her, Ellie raised her glass. To survival, she toasted, her voice clear and strong. To integrity, and to the true meaning of family, not always by blood, but by bond, by loyalty, and by love. Ellie had big plans for the small condo she was originally meant to receive. She decided to turn it into a refuge, a safe space for women rebuilding their lives after divorce, a place where they could find support and community. It felt like a fitting new chapter, transforming a symbol of loss into a beacon of hope. That night, as she prepared for bed, Ellie retrieved her old wedding ring from its velvet box. She looked at the simple gold band, a symbol of 42 years of a life that was now irrevocably changed. With a quiet sigh, she placed it back, closing the box with a soft click. The chapter was closed. Her phone buzzed with new texts. From Lucas, "Love you, Mom. Thank you for everything." And from Clara, "You're the strongest woman I know, Ellie. So grateful for you." Ellie smiled, a genuine, peaceful smile that reached her eyes. She thought of her grandmother, her mother, and the countless women who had come before her, each facing their own challenges, each rising with quiet strength. She was part of a powerful lineage, a line of strong women who bent but never broke. She looked out her window at the majestic oak tree in her yard, planted by Marcus on their 10th anniversary. Like her, it had bent in many storms, but it had not broken. It had endured, and it had grown stronger.